Okay, this is my first day back in the hot seat with my partner Alan at Business Exposed. And today we have got Alex Robertson, who is a father, property investor, and finance professional. And we hit on loads of topics on his journey. Please tune in. It's hitting on Sunday, and like and subscribe on all our channels, Spotify and YouTube.
So Alex, take us back to the younger you. What was life like growing up, childhood?
You know, I was pretty fortunate. I had a really good childhood, and you know, when I look at kids now and the challenges they have with social media and computer games and all that sort of stuff, that was kind of so new at the time when I was growing up. So I was really fortunate. You know, a lot of summers out playing football, building tree houses, and you know, my family didn't have a lot of money, but you know, I had a really good upbringing. My parents had both been married before, so I had an older brother and sister, or kind of half brother and sister, but they were kind of up and away from a young age, so it was kind of like growing up as an only child.
Right.
So they were very protective. I was kind of always keen to get out and do more in the world, and they were kind of holding me back a little bit. But, I mean, not a lot of money. I was conscious that we were kind of we lived in a fairly safe, nice environment, but we're definitely kind of at the bottom end of the wealth spectrum, when everybody had the 2 cars and the bigger houses, and you know we never had that. But you know, I had a good upbringing. They were very keen on education and working through that. My dad was a lorry driver. I hadn't had much education. He'd been in the army, and then he was a fireman, and wanted me to use my head rather than, you know, my brawn.
Yeah.
So, you know, I went through school. I was a bit lazy, to be honest. You know, I could have done a lot more. I was like a solid B student.
Right. Not bad.
Yeah, but like without a lot of effort, you know, and all of my teachers were always kind of trying to push me to do a bit more, work a bit harder. But for me, it was just, you know, this path into, you know, higher education, go to university. At the time, you know, it was like lawyer, accountant, doctor. Those are the sort of things you want to go into, and that's essentially what I did. I became an accountant. Went to Heriot Watt, studied accounting finance, done a master's, then started working when I was 21. I was really lucky to get in a job because, you know, I finished university, and the expectation of university is, right, you're going to go into this big corporate career, it's going to be great, you're going to get all this money. And, you know, the first job offer I got as a trainee chartered accountant was 11 grand a year was what they were offering.
When was that?
That was 2005, 2006.
So not that long ago.
No,
in the grand scheme of things, to be offered that.
I know, but that's what it was. You know, there was so much demand for people trying to get into these graduate programs, and you know, they felt like they could pay peanuts because they were investing a lot of money in training you. And I was like, I just can't do it. I can't work for, you know, the last year of my studies, I was going to move in with one of my mates. My parents didn't want that. Again, being very protective. So they said, we'll help you out getting your first house. And like, again, didn't have a lot of money, so it was 100% mortgage at the time.
Right.
I was a student. They guaranteed it. I got a little 50-odd grand flat in Larbert. So my mortgage was maybe only £300 a month. But I still couldn't see a way to afford this with 11 grand a year. So I had to knock that job back.
Really?
And then I was just really lucky. I got into an oil and gas job in finance in Edinburgh. And I think that was 19 grand a year. And it was like even better than Ernst & Young and all the big accounting firms were offering. So, you know, it was just, I was very fortunate to get the role I did. And then I spent the next 12, 13 years travelling the world, really, with oil and gas. I really didn't spend much time in the UK at all.
Did you enjoy it?
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved every minute of it. You know, to get... I remember a lot of my friends were looking at coming out of university and they were going to go take a gap year to see the world and stuff. I got to do that while I was working.
Yeah.
You know,
and getting paid.
And getting
At
paid
the
for
same
it.
time.
Yeah.
Getting paid and training, doing my chartered accountancy. And the first trip, the first work trip I went with them was to South Africa. I had to go and help out in the accounts department because someone was on holiday. So it was like a 6-week gig. And they took me on safari to Shamwari Game Reserve, you know, whilst I was there, and I was like, you know, people work their entire life to do stuff like this, and I was just really fortunate that, you know, I got to do it as part of this job for a while, and that was it. You know, I was in Norway, Azerbaijan, Russia for 4 years, Norway for 2 years, Baku I spent 5 years there, so that was quite a while. Texas for a bit, and it was really good, really good. That, you know, I got to experience a life that I never thought was possible. You know, when I lived in Azerbaijan, I had my own driver, I had a full-time cleaner, I had this amazing apartment that looked over the water, and life was good.
Yeah. Do you think that gave you the spark to do something different, or
I think, you
did
know,
it open your eyes?
It quelled the hunger that I had, you know, having grown up and seeing that my parents didn't have a lot. You know, I wanted much more out of life. And, you know, through the salary and the job and all that, I got it, you know, and it was phenomenal. But then in my kind of early 30s, my view on it started to change a little bit, because, you know, you do get to a point where you see, okay, you know, this company looks after me really well. However, only because I'm at their beck and call.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not the sort of job you switch off when you go home at 5 o'clock at night.
Right.
You know, you're there. You're away from your family. You're away from your friends. You're consumed by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get paid by the hour, but if you did, you know, you're doing 80 odd hours. It was normal to work the weekends while you were there.
Right.
So it consumed a lot of life, and you get in your early 30s, you start to think, you know, what's the legacy here? What am I doing? You know, I could do this to retirement, but I'm going to be wherever they want me to be in the world.
Yeah, they've still got the control. As much as they're providing you with a good life almost.
Yeah.
They've still got the control over you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to be honest, like through my 20s, I was having such a good time. I didn't really have much financial education, you know, and I think that is a big challenge with a lot of kids just now. There's just no, like, understanding the fundamentals of how to build wealth and look after yourself. So yeah, I had this great life, but I was spending quite a lot of money. Wasn't really providing that much for the future. I had a property back in the UK, but you know, I wasn't being sensible with, you know, what I had a new Mercedes convertible and a house in the UK, and I was never there. You know, just things like that where you're just trying to show you're doing well, but the reality is you're just spending money that's coming in. And, so that started to grind on me a little bit in my early 30s, and I think you get to that age where you start to think about kids and family and settling down, and that life wasn't conducive to that. And I think the big wake-up point for me was I'd been in Azerbaijan. Well, firstly, I was in Moscow. I was there for 3 years, and my boss and I were asked to go down to Baku, and it was supposed to be 2 weeks we were there to talk to BP about this big project they wanted to do in Baku. And those talks went really well, and we started negotiating on a deal to do this big project in Azerbaijan using the local facility, and we'd come in and we'd run it and upgrade it and all that sort of stuff. So what was supposed to be 2 weeks turned into like 5 years in Baku. And everyone went back to Moscow. They had to ship all my stuff out because we got so consumed with it.
Wow.
But it started my boss and I and a small team of guys from the organisation, and we ended up negotiating what was like a £500 million contract. Huge pipeline called the Southern Gas Corridor in Azerbaijan, and we were doing all the kind of pipe coating work for it. And through the course of like literally 6 months, we'd negotiated this contract, done this deal. We had to hire all the staff. We had to upgrade the facility. And at that point, once everything was agreed, the company started kicking in and giving us some resource. But up until that point, it was all us. And throughout the course of the 5 years of that project, we must have made about an extra 25 mil more than the company had expected.
Right.
And even up to the last point, I was negotiating this foreign exchange variance with BP that my company thought was a waste of time. They said, you're wasting, they're not going to do anything on that. And I ended up getting £1 million out of them at the end. And it was just me messing about and negotiating about with them. And then they gave me a special one-time bonus at the end of that year, and it was like $12,000. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? You know, like, I have the capabilities to, you know, that was really what I was doing for this company. I was going into the new locations, and okay, I'm finance, but you know, it was much broader than that. Going into new locations, setting the companies up. You know, they bring in the guys to build the factories, but we'd set up the business. You know,
Yeah, the
all the
infrastructure
systems,
of it,
the
yeah.
processes, the staff. You know, a lot of the fundamentals you do as an entrepreneur, and you know, okay, they were looking after me really well, but it wasn't like having your own gig.
Yeah.
So combination of that incident and then, you know, just the whole idea of wanting to have a family and kind of settle down, it was just time to start looking for something of my own and building it. So, you know, I worked with them for another 5 years or so, but in the meantime, Laurie and I had started building what we've built now. You know, it was,
Which is phenomenal.
Yeah, I was going to say for anybody who's watching the podcast, this is the reason why they're going to be watching, because they want to hear about the property part.
yeah.
Yep.
So where did the relationship with you and Laurie come from? Did you know each other prior?
Yeah. We went to school together.
Right. Okay.
But we weren't friends at school. Laurie was way too popular.
Right. Okay.
and you look at him now, but he was like,
Is he still the popular one? Or?
Well, he's certainly the most outspoken, but
Right.
he was a DJ back in school, you know, super confident. You know, he had a lot of luck with the ladies. His wife
Don't know if his wife wants to listen to this one.
Oh, he's settled down massively now, but you know, just a completely different character. You'd probably look at us in school and think they'll never be friends,
Yep.
let alone business partners. But you know, in our early 20s, we started doing these jolly boy outing guys from school. It was like a trip down south to watch the football, and that's where Laurie and I started kind of hanging out. And there must have been probably about 5 years of those before Laurie and I actually started talking about property. And he was in a similar situation working for an oil and gas company. It was actually a company his dad founded, and then they sold out to this Italian company.
Okay.
So he was working essentially for his brother, who was MD, didn't like it. He was, you know, getting away with quite a lot, you know, maybe not working as much as he should have, but he wanted to build something for himself, and I think his dad, being an entrepreneur and having built that business, he felt like, you know, he wanted to build something for himself.
Yeah.
So,
And had the capabilities, no doubt, to go and do it.
Well, I think the interesting thing about our partnership is that probably each of us individually don't have the capabilities to build what we've built, but combined
Collectively.
we do. It really works well. And then when you add Connor in the mix, who's our third business partner, who came along a little bit later, you know, the combination is really what makes us powerful, not so much, you know, the individual.
Each individual skill set, yeah.
You know, I'm very analytical, systems driven, quite conservative because I'm a finance guy.
Yeah.
Laurie's sales, big ideas, always try to push us into the next big, massive deal.
Yeah.
And Connor sits somewhere quite nicely in between, and he's obviously very sales driven and been in property since he was 19. So that's it's just a really good dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Laurie and I, we were just chatting, just back and forward. Both wanted to start a business, both interested in property, and I think with any entrepreneur looking to get into business, there's sort of three things that tend to work well for entrepreneurs, whether it's pain, passion, or profession. So you have a personal pain and you think you can solve it better than something that's already on the market. Profession, you've been in an industry, you've seen how it works, you know the ins and outs of it, and you know, again, you want to do something different with it. You want to put a different spin on it or whatever. Or passion, you know, something that you're generally passionate about. You want to go deep on it. You want to learn all the ins and outs of it, and you know that is going to drive your success. So for us, it was definitely the latter. I mean, neither of us had been in property. Not, you know, when we brought Connor in, you know, he was definitely the professional side of it because he'd only done properties from 19. But for Laurie and I, we're just passionate about it. We just spent 3 years learning everything we could about it, and it was a time where property was changing massively as well. Like 2015 to 18. You know, I had all the Section 24 stuff coming in. You know, the ADS came in. You know, there was a massive move against landlords by the Scottish Government. There was a lot changing at the time, which for us felt like an opportunity. You know, if there's people leaving the market, then there has to be an opportunity there. So
Definitely.
You know, we just went deep for a few years, and it really came down to the fact that over time we realised that we were doing more together than we would do separately, and we both started building our own portfolios separately.
Right.
And I think I'd put a like a 50 quid ad out on Facebook to try and get some below market value property. And I got a lead, but I wasn't as confident on the sales side as Laurie was. So, you know, I'd said to him, look, I've got this lead. I think it could be a really good deal. You go negotiate it and we can go 50-50 on it.
Right.
And he did. It was a property in Alloa that basically agreed to buy it. Like one of these 400 Block X local authority things. We agreed to buy it for 25 grand. And eventually I think it refinanced at like 65 or so. And we didn't spend much money on it. So it was a brilliant deal.
Yeah.
But that was the first deal in our joint venture. And, you know, Laurie was doing a bit of sourcing, and the next deal came along and we agreed to do that together because I found the money to do it, and, you know, so on and so forth. And I think within the first year, we're like, right, okay, let's just park our other stuff and focus on this.
Yeah. Cool.
So I was going to ask, what was your portfolio sitting at before you done your joint ventures? How successful was that part of it on your own?
Well, we'd been going for, I had AWR property, which I'd been going for like a year. I had 5 units and I had one buy-to-let in my own name. And I think Laurie had about 10 in his. So it was like, you know, it was early doors. We'd probably done okay to get like 5 or so in a year.
Yeah. That's good going.
But, you know, nothing compared to what we did afterwards.
Yeah.
Do you guys just now, what is your, I mean, there's a lot you guys are doing just now. Do you guys have a preferred strategy right now? Because you've grown a massive portfolio. What does the mix look like within that portfolio?
It's changed dramatically, actually, over the last couple of years. You know, because when we started out, the objective was like, how quickly can we get to 1,000 properties? And if you look at it, we got to 200 in 2.5 years of working together.
Yep.
And we're just over 300. So it looks like we've not done much over the last couple of years, but actually the portfolio's changed massively because it was a lot of kind of lower end stock. You know, we bought our first big deal together was 83 units in Lanarkshire that we bought as part of one portfolio. And, you know, at the time, I mean, it was terrifying, to be honest. Like we had to put out about 60 grand on this portfolio before we even bought it to get it compliant.
Right.
So that, like, we managed to find this product, and I don't think Redwood still do this, but Redwood massively backed us at the start. And they were lending up to 90% of the purchase price, as long as it wasn't any more than 70% of the actual value of the property. So you've got them discounted,
Right, okay.
but they'll give you 90% against the purchase price. So that was a way to get massive growth without having to put a huge amount of money down. But in order to get their lending, we had to get the properties compliant because these guys that had it before hadn't been running it right.
Right.
So we just took this massive punt of, like, at any point that deal could have fallen down and we were 60 grand in a hole, you know. But, you know, thankfully it worked out. We got that deal done, but it was fairly low end stock. You know, it was like 83 properties. I think the value was about 4 million, and we bought it for 2.8, 2.9, something like that. So, you know, like, obviously we're not far away from Lanarkshire here. So, like, Motherwell, Forgewood, I don't know if you know, it's a pretty rough area in Motherwell. There was like 40 properties there.
Right.
There's properties in Bells Hill, properties in Wishaw, you know, mostly ex-local authority stuff. And it cash flowed really well. But as we've kind of developed and generated more cash and stuff like that, we have tried to diversify the portfolio. So we've now sold off most of that stock. And we've done quite well out of it, to be fair.
Okay.
Because even, you know, I think the expectation is the lower end stock doesn't really have much capital appreciation. But, you know, the funny thing about it is when, you know, those Forgewood ones, on average, we paid 25 grand a property. So to sell them for 35 is a huge capital appreciation, but in monetary terms, it's not a lot. You know? So, you know, that was good, but we decided that we wanted to diversify the portfolio a bit more, have a bit more kind of high end stock. Last year we bought 100 in Aberdeen. That's sort of the kind of cream of our portfolio. It's all really nice stock. If you know Union Street in Aberdeen, at the top of Union Street you've got the Citadel, which is like this beautiful building, kind of looks like a castle. It's got a big turret. So that's part of our portfolio we bought last year, that building. And it's an incredible building. All the flats are kind of like 120, 130 grand kind of plus.
Yep.
So like nicer stock.
Yeah.
Doesn't cash flow quite as well as the lower stock, but having that nice balance in
there's
the
a balance
portfolio
between.
is worked really well. And Aberdeen's been a big play for us because we think there's massive capital appreciation to come there.
Yeah.
Obviously the prices tanked in 2015. They've not really recovered, although the rental market has recovered. There's a huge amount of investment going on there in renewables. We think it's going to be a renewable hub, and ultimately we're going to see some really good capital appreciation there, but time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aberdeen is one of those ones where a lot of people have avoided because of what happened with the oil and gas industry.
Yep.
Back in 2015, it was decimated that area.
Absolutely.
Completely.
I know so many people that lost so much money because there was such a big investor market there. Thankfully we didn't get in till after that point, but again, it's just looking at the opportunity, and for me there really isn't too many other areas in Scotland when you can say, right, there's some serious opportunity in that, getting in low as we.
Well, at the end of the day, you'd think, even from a government perspective, that seeing Aberdeen going from what it was to then what it went to, they think, sure, a city like that, you can't let a city like that die.
No.
Something has to be done to rejuvenate it.
Well, the turning point for me was, I seen this graph that showed the average property prices in all the major towns and cities in Scotland. And I think, we're from the Falkirk area, so the average property price at the time was about 170k in Falkirk. And then I looked at Aberdeen and it was 148,000. And like, if you've been to Aberdeen, you see the infrastructure, you see the size of that city, you see what it's got to offer versus, a town like Falkirk, which is to a degree dying with, BP, INEOS shutting down, and, a lot of contraction in the industry there. Just doesn't add up, really.
Yeah.
And that for me was like, right, okay, we need to seriously look at that. And I think we bought about 150 properties or so in Aberdeen since.
Yep.
So time will tell, hopefully.
Yeah. So is that it just all goes back to that mindset thing, isn't it? As you said there, when you see that as an opportunity, whereas a lot of people would see it as,
they'll not touch it.
Yeah, I'll not touch it. it's really, that's just an excuse, really.
Yeah. That whole Warren Buffett statement, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. That's our mantra, really.
Yeah.
You just have to look for the opportunity. Not to say that always works out, but we feel like we're going to be on the right side of this one at least.
Yeah.
So for anybody that's listening who is maybe not in property full time or just kind of starting to get in, and they're hearing you saying, for example, we're buying portfolios of 80, 100, what's the kind of reasons that people who have a scale of properties like that would be wanting to sell? If you're buying a portfolio at 80, for example, what are you finding the reasons that those landlords may be wanting to sell?
Well, there are a few reasons, but the number one reason, which is the number one reason why a lot of people are looking into buying businesses in general, not just necessarily property businesses, is the baby boomers are coming to retirement. It's a huge opportunity. Like, there is tens of thousands of baby boomers coming to retirement, over the next 5 to 10 years. And a lot of those people are business owners or small business owners that are looking to retire and sell up. And, it's a huge opportunity. And that's what we found with the majority of portfolios we bought. The Aberdeen 100 was, a guy that was in his 70s. The lenders don't really want to lend to you anymore. And, as a result, unless your kids are going to take over the business and, and his weren't really that interested or involved, he was already very wealthy. He just had to sell up.
There's no other option by the sounds of things than sell up.
And the benefit of that type of strategy in terms of buying is that, the people selling are investors. It's not like your individual home seller where it could be anybody in any situation. Someone that's built a portfolio has built it with intent. They're a business owner. They understand the ins and outs of investment. So you come to a place of, coming to the negotiating table with an expectation that there will be some sort of discount, because one, you're buying in bulk and not many people can do that. But two, it's an investment and it needs to be attractive for the buyer. So we also have this thing with portfolios called the property valuation, or a 90-day, 180-day valuation, which means that the aggregate value of all these properties might be 10 mil, but the portfolio value, because you're selling a big block in one, is maybe 20% less than that.
Right.
So that can create a lot of discounts. And that was the driver behind us scaling the way we did is that, you know, we found a lending option that would lend based on the aggregate market value, and we were negotiating discounts of 20-30% based on the investment value of
Right.
the portfolio. And, you know, it meant that we could grow without having to put huge deposits down. So,
And were you having to go and do, I mean, did you go out and do due diligence at each of those properties, or did you go basically off desktop valuations or pictures, or, I mean, how does someone, from our perspective, who wants to scale quick,
yeah.
Look at a portfolio of 100 and go, we'll just take a punt
Well,
and hope this works out? Or
it's not so much a punt that we view all of them. No, there was someone in all of them because they all had to be surveyed.
Right.
And you know, there's condition reports on those surveys and all that, so you get a
Right.
flavour for the
Right.
condition of the property. You know, we obviously do this in our business. You know, our core business just now operates around We Buy Home Scotland, which is a home buyer. So it's like all about trying to do due diligence as quickly and as light touch as possible, because people are willing to sell their houses for a discount on the basis that they're not going to have to go through all the faff that someone would normally
that
have to.
everybody else has to go through, yeah.
So the more you can do in terms of desktop valuations, we use a system called Home Track, which is the same system that the likes of Together or some of the big lenders would use to get a desktop valuation on a property.
Okay.
And it gives you like a confidence level of, like, you know, 4 and above is high confidence that this is close to the valuation of the property.
Okay.
When it's lower confidence, we then need to look at surveys and stuff like that.
Right.
We'll always put someone into a property before we agree a deal on it. One of our valuers usually goes in, and again they'll do a kind of broad brush understanding of, you know, what's the refurb on this. I think the key for us is that we tend not to buy property. We tend to buy properties on the basis of the situation of the seller.
Right.
You know, the seller is motivated, not the property is a problem. You know,
Yes.
it's about
Yeah.
trying to get away from those big renovations, or you know, we don't do big renovations. We don't put our clients into deals that are big renovations. It's really about the situation of the seller and the fact that they need a quick sale and they need to move on
Yeah.
quickly. And it's no different for portfolios.
Yeah.
You know, the stuff in Aberdeen was much easier. We maybe seen inside 30 of the 100.
Right.
But it was big blocks. The guy had developed it all himself. So
Right.
all very similar
Yeah,
standard.
they'd be very
and,
similar.
You know, so we were able to get comfort that way. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
How a deal like that? How would you fund buying a bulk of properties like that? Because anybody, the majority of people who are listening here, we're talking obviously in scale here. There'll be a lot of people listening who are not in property and they want to maybe get their first property. And the first thing, the comments I generally get in social media, and I'm sure you'll be the same, will all be the same, is I want to get into that, but I've not got any money. And they're thinking, so they're probably sitting thinking to themselves, you're buying hundreds, I can't even buy one.
Yeah.
For somebody that's in that position, then how are you funding such a scale? In simple terms, almost,
Yeah.
to somebody that's not in property.
Well, your lender is an important part of it, and as I said, there are lenders that are willing to be more aggressive in terms of how much they'll lend you, and obviously this gets easier as you get bigger because the lenders are more willing to support you.
Yeah.
And
They
you've got all
know
these,
You've got a
you,
wee
you
bit-
know them, and
you've got all these other assets that, you know, they can take security in. And,
Yeah.
and
You've got a wee bit
that-
credibility as well on what you've done in the past.
Yeah, so for instance, when we first started working with Together, who are our kind of main bridging lender, so when we're buying, we buy on a bridge, which really is just a short-term mortgage. They would only lend us 75%. That's the standard offering that they'll give anybody, so you need to put the 25% down yourself. Because we've been working with them and we're a corporate client now and stuff, they'll give us 85%. So we only have to find the 15.
Right.
But there are other bridging lenders out there. I think Ultimate is one of them that will lend up to 100% of the purchase price. Oh, but you still need to pay all the fees and stuff like
Yeah.
that go with it. But as long as the discount is significant enough, again, they're not lending any more than 70% of the market value. But if you've got 30% discount, you might be able to get 100% lending there. So there are lending opportunities out there that massively reduce the amount of cash that you have to put into, you know, these sort of deals. The first 83 unit portfolio was a joint venture partner.
right, okay.
They gave us the money. They got 50% of the company. Over time, we actually bought them out of that company but they get the money back through the refinance generally anyway, so they're only putting the money in short term. So we did a fair bit of that. We do quite a lot of flips now as well, as sort of cash generation, so it allows us to then buy more and hold more if we're generating some quick flips and some quick cash. But for anyone starting, you'd probably be surprised at how little money you can get away with in terms of getting your first few under your belt. People talk about private investors quite a lot, and I think there's the assumption that private investment comes from venture capitalists and guys with top hats and canes. And all of the kind of private investment funds we got to start were friends and family. People that knew us, trusted us, knew that we would, make sure they get their money back come hell or high water. So, there's that. Laurie loves the credit card strategy. He's still using it just now because he's building a portfolio for his wife. And, again, people freak out. Not financial advice, by the way. We always need to get that in.
Of course,
but, there are a lot of 0% credit. You can get
money. I've done it myself.
Money transfer, balance transfer. So money transfer, you can go straight into your account. Balance transfer, you move it from one credit card to the other. But you can use that to access quite a bit of cash, and lawyers are fine with you using that as deposit money because they know where it's come from. It's easy to pass AML. It all comes back to understanding good debt and bad debt, and unless you have that fundamental principle, if you've not read your Rich Dad Poor Dad, and people can get themselves in a hell of a mess with this stuff if they don't do it properly.
If they don't do it right.
So again, get educated, know what you're doing before you make those moves. But there is a world of money out there. You only need to look at the inflation to understand that they're printing more and more of it. So anybody that thinks they can't get started, we've had a few clients, younger guys, come looking to get the first few deals done, and the majority of them just needed the confidence to be able to have the difficult conversations with people that they knew could help them.
Right.
And seeing those guys get the first couple of deals under the belt was really cool. And especially when it's refinanced and they're delivering the money back. So yeah.
What do you think? What's your opinion on the property world right now in social media? And I'll tell you why I'm asking the question, because 100% agree with what you just said there. And people think that where does the funds come from? You could, any of us could open a phone just now and there'll be somebody on an Instagram reel saying that, and I see this every day, right? Oh, I'm just off a call with a private investor in Dubai who's thinking a bit right? And then what people who are not in property think, oh, hold on, I don't know any sheikhs in Dubai, right? I don't know any billionaires, right? So I'm not going to get investment. Well, you're right. I found that in myself, and the reason I'm resonating because I found that in myself. And when you start, you'll be surprised that when you have been a job where you are credible and credible within your circle, then you'll be surprised at the people that will come out and invest with you 100%. That you would never even think. I've had people who are ex-colleagues invest that you would never have thought, a period of time that in the future they would be investing in your business. So that as an investor, we could invest in each other. An investor can be almost anybody, whereas I think there's a lot of social medias portraying something slightly different in all ends of the property aspect. I mean, even you go into... Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, nobody wants to say I built this amazing business, but it was my granny that gave me the money to start. It just doesn't sound as good as like, I had a private investor.
Exactly. People are I think that's where a lot of social media is a wee bit almost. It's not portraying the right thing, because a lot of people, and by the way, the ones who I see who are really succeeding in social media, right, are the ones who are absolutely just honest and tell the truth. Whereas
there's a drastic lack of that on social media just now. It's
one of the reasons we started this was because a lot of it's portrayed as it's all easy and it's like chasing rainbows, and it's
this is my
A to B without any diversions, and it's just not like that.
It's my number one concern for future generations of kids, and I've got 2 young boys, and I'm really worried about what the world looks like for them.
I agree.
And this is the 3 things that are going to be the focus for me with my kids. Learning entrepreneurship and business, and with that comes understanding money. They're not going to get taught that at school.
Nope.
AI has to be forefront, learning that the world is drastically going to change. And like I said, back when I left school, it was all about becoming an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer. That's no longer the world. You know, it may be for a short spell, but by the time my kids get out of school or university or education or whatever, it's not going to be. So they need to be at the forefront of artificial intelligence and understanding that it's going to drastically change our world, and not in the next 20, 30 years, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And get out in the world, like get out in nature, speak to people,
Experience things.
experience life, develop interpersonal skills. Like, you know, the most fundamental, you know, I think Warren Buffett still says the most impactful book for him was How to Win Friends and Influence People. You know, because it gave him the skills to then be able to go out and get these investors, because he knew how to talk to people.
Yeah.
You know, he was a good number guy, very smart, but if you can't communicate properly with people, then, you know, how do you take your business forward? How do you take your life forward? So, like, that point for me on, like, getting away from social media, not seeing the world through the lens of social media is so important for kids. It's so critically important. And I worry about it. I worry probably about that more than anything, I'd say.
I agree, because I've got 2 young kids. I mean, they're young, they're in nursery and in primary 1.
Yeah.
And I think about it all the time. You know, by the time that they're even at an age of 17, 18, what is the world? I like to listen. I like to always wake up with a positive attitude and do the right thing. But I'm also trying to be realistic.
Yeah.
And also, I know the things that I got up to when I was that age, right?
Yeah.
And it's probably only going to be worse in that period of time. So I think is what we do for a living. You're also trying to protect your kids and set them up with the best lifestyle as possible to give them every advantage.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, for me, I genuinely, it's funny, we do regular kind of webinars on property, and, you know, see, when you do the ones about, you know, make X amount of money, here's the strategy to make X amount of money a month, and also make sure that you don't pay very much tax and structure in the right way and stuff. You get loads of people on those webinars. I done one last month on AI, the impact that AI is going to have on the world and on property in the future, and there was no interest. Nobody wants to talk about it.
They're all scared.
Terrified. They just rather be blind to it.
Yeah.
But it's going to revolutionise the world. So for me, it was like, you know, I look at my children, what AI, I think the biggest risk for me in the short term is that it's going to massively change the wealth divide. You know, if you think about all these people that are asset owners, that are big businesses, if they can all of a sudden get rid of a whole bunch of staff and have AI working 24 hours a day, imagine the output, imagine the extra income. How much more money can they make? They're going to get richer and richer and richer. Whereas the people that have been displaced through, you know, not having these jobs, what are they left with?
Yeah.
So then this wealth divide just extrapolates. So if you're not actively trying to build wealth for the future, to give your kids a start and a chance, I think it's a dangerous place to be. And I do think this is like potentially one of the last big opportunities to get on it, because, you know, look at humanity. We've got, as people, we've got 3 things we offer the world: our physical capabilities, our mental intelligence, and our interpersonal, you know, relationships.
Yeah.
Well, the industrial age took away most of the need for the physical.
Yeah.
The artificial age is going to take away most of the need for the intelligence, and all we're left with is this personal interconnection.
Interaction, yeah.
Yeah. So again, that's why I go
And we've
back
not
to,
even managed to, you know, get that right
no.
through all the years. There's still
Yeah.
people who are out there that haven't got that skill.
Yeah, I think Xboxes and PlayStations have got a lot to answer for.
Well, that's it. And the fact that most of the communication kids are having is through social media now.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to that point of, like, it's one of my biggest fears, because if you don't have those interpersonal skills, what have you got to offer the world in a world that's completely revolutionised with AI?
Yeah. You go back to, you know, at the start of the conversation, the world of entrepreneurship. You look at, you know, yeah, you've came from an educated background, but a lot of entrepreneurs haven't. And they're not the most intelligent people in the world, but they have the ability to have conversations and negotiate and build relationships, and that is the world of business, and that is the world entrepreneurship.
That's going to be the crux of it at
Yeah.
the end of the day, because if you've got systems that can deal with all that complicated finance stuff and the ins and outs of the kind of systemization of business, if you've got systems that deal with that, what you're left with is your ability to convince someone else to buy something you've got, or your ability to convince someone to invest in something you've got. Those are the skills you need. So, again, I go back to those three things for kids. It's, learn entrepreneurship, learn AI, and learn interpersonal skills.
And it's all the three things that the schools aren't doing anything about.
They won't. And if you think about it now, like, we're however many years down the line in education, they're still not dealing with basic money skills. Like, kids come out of university, they don't know what a pension is and how it works.
No.
It's mad. So if they're not dealing with that, there's no chance they're going to deal with AI or any of that more complicated stuff.
Yeah.
I think the main problem is that the world of entrepreneurship is all about learning and pivoting strategies, whereas the education system isn't pivoting their strategy.
No.
The strategy that they're using to educate is still from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is back in an industrial area.
It's like government in general. It's such a machine now. It's so difficult to move the direction of it. It's just this huge overgrown monster.
Do you think it is, or do you think it's the people in the government that don't have the correct capabilities to be able to pivot and manoeuvre and change, and also maybe have a set of balls to say what they actually think?
Well, there's that,
Yeah.
but that comes back to the system. At the end of the day, if you've only got a 4-year window, how much can you
How
achieve in a
much can you
4-year
change?
window? And because they've only got a 4-year window, their focus is on getting re-elected for the next 4 years, so they'll not make any big moves.
Yeah.
I mean, say what you want about Trump, at least he's making some big moves. He's a terrifying guy, but
Yeah.
he's making moves at least.
Yeah. And at least he has the balls
He's
to
got
open
the
his
balls to
mouth.
do it,
Let's
yeah,
be honest,
yeah.
right? He's one of the characters that, if you go into probably any room in the world and you mention his name, well,
Everybody's got an opinion.
yeah, 50% of the room are going to love him,
Yeah.
and 50% of the room are going to hate him.
Yeah.
But guess what? He's got 100% of people talking about him.
100%.
That's it.
100%.
Absolutely.
Some man.
What affects, keeping on the politics just now and the relevance of whether it's business in general or property, with everything that's going on in the world just now, what effects do you think that's having? I mean, we're seeing a lot of people exiting the UK, a lot of business owners exiting the UK. You guys are clearly firm here and clearly building your own business.
We are, to a degree, but there's 1,000 millionaires leaving the country every month. It's epidemic level, and a lot of people, we unfortunately have quite a negative view of wealth in the UK. So they're like, let them go, let them go.
Yeah.
But with that goes a lot of business, a lot of jobs, a lot of wealth creation.
Yeah.
The fact is that the next wave of wealth creation is going to come through technology and artificial intelligence. We don't have the infrastructure in the UK to facilitate that. Even if we had the regulation to attract people here, if it was attractive for business and entrepreneurs, which is not, it couldn't be further away from that. We still don't even have the infrastructure to support the massive data centers they need for this stuff. So, like, I'm worried about the UK. And whilst I say, yes, we're building a business here, we're investing in the UK, we're growing, we'll always be involved in property here. It's hard to see how much worse it could get before you need to do something. And a lot of business owners are just getting to that point. If your business is mobile, if it's over the internet, if you just need a Wi-Fi connection, and a laptop to be able to do your business, which a lot of people do now.
Yep.
Why would you stay in the UK other than family and those connections?
Yeah. The UK,
Absolutely.
in my opinion, over time is going to become a third world country. We're allowing, you've just said, we're allowing the wealth creators, the entrepreneurs, the self-starters, the thinkers, we're allowing them to exit the country, and we're welcoming the doors to the third world. So what's going to happen over time?
The flow of direction.
Yeah, you can see where it's going to go over a period of time. However, go back to that mindset thing. You're right what you're saying. We're all here just now. We're all here. We're all in the UK. So while we're here, we're all going to do the best we possibly can and build our own businesses.
Yeah.
But at the same point, that's also a realistic opinion of where things are going.
Yeah, you need to keep one eye on the future and really, build your own plan around it. You know, it's one thing to create wealth here, but you know, to protect wealth in the long term, I'm not sure if this is the place to leave it, because you know the regulative changes are terrifying. You know, just the swings they have. You know, like, even the stuff we're seeing for landlords just now, it's like you're genuinely nervous to see what's coming next. You know, we're pretty good at pivoting and not being too bogged down by, you know, regulatory changes and stuff. Like Scottish Government's been after landlords for the last 10 years, and we managed to prosper through it. So we kind of feel like we'll figure it out. But long term, if this continues to get worse, what is the UK left with? It's a scary thing.
I think the frightening thing is the speed that they bring these new regulations in with. I mean, it's literally overnight, and you've got to learn to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of transactions we had on the go when they changed the ADS from 6 to 8%, it's just like, well, you just need to swallow it.
Yep.
You know, there's not much you can do about that. Planning in the long term is different, but you know, for transactions ongoing, you're stuffed.
Yeah.
What other than talking about entrepreneurship, and you're obviously big in property, what other legs do you have to your business?
Well, our property investment business is fairly passive. You know, other than working on new deals and managing the finance side of things, you know, we've got agents managing all the kind of buy-to-let. We've got a team in the office who project manage refurbs and also project manage any stuff that we need to do for the existing properties, whether it's just maintenance, repairs, stuff like that. So we don't spend a lot of time on that.
Right.
Other than working on new deals. We're in the process of finalising a new portfolio acquisition again, Aberdeen. It's another 60 properties or so. Tends to take quite a long time, probably 6 months before we close on that. But so that's always kind of happening in the background. But day-to-day focus for us is on Real Property Scotland, which is fundamentally driven by We Buy Home Scotland, which is our home buying brand. So our, you know, our position now is the number one home buyer in Scotland. So, you know, we spend a fortune on marketing every month to get opportunities to buy properties below market value. Okay. We either buy them for ourselves or we trade them on to our clients.
Right.
And we work with a whole bunch of really cool clients that are like us, trying to build and scale the buy-to-let portfolio. We don't consider ourselves a property training course. Going back to the social media thing, the amount of people out there that are doing that and just taking people's money and no results, and so that's a really important thing for us. Is like any people that come to work with us, we're creating qualified buyers for We Buy Home Scotland. We want people who know how to get deals done and who can buy quickly and efficiently, because that's why we get the discounts. You have to buy quick. So to feed We Buy Home Scotland, so we can spend more on marketing, we can grow that. We were looking at Google last week because we're finally starting to get some data out of them, and we're only getting 5% of market share. I mean, we're spending like 60 grand a month on marketing just now, and we're getting 5% of market share. So our opportunity to grow that home buying business, and you know, it's more opportunities for us to buy properties, it's more opportunities for our clients to buy and grow. That's our big focus. There's a lot of potential for growth there. So our office in Glasgow is really focused on, you know, helping clients build their portfolio and growing We Buy Home Scotland. And as a kind of aside to We Buy Home Scotland, the deals that we don't want to buy or don't work for our clients, we sell through Town and Country Property Auctions, which is another kind of gig. We're also looking at starting a mortgage brokerage. We're already doing quite a lot of finance intermediary stuff.
Right.
So it makes sense to tack on a mortgage brokerage to help our clients exit deals quicker, as well as help sort out all the bridging stuff on the front end, which we kind of do anyway just now. So that's a focus. You know, we have been talking for a while about having our own bridging company. In fact, we started the business Real Finance last year. We've just not found the right funding solution yet. We are looking for the guys with top hats and canes because we need a lot of money.
You need a lot of money, I would imagine.
And you know, we were going to start it with some of our own money, but you know, the reality is, when you can lend a couple of mil a month easily, you need a decent.
Yeah.
you need a decent amount of money to make that business
Yep.
work. So it's still very much on the cards. You know, the beauty of it for us is because we're doing all the front end due diligence on the deals that we're selling out, whether it's us buying or our clients buying. We've already done all of the kind of underwriting stuff that the lenders have to do to make sure they're comfortable with the property. So it'd be really easy for us to lend. You know, we'd almost be able to put a deal out to a client and say, right, we'll give you 100% funding on that because
You're so
seen it,
confident.
we know the deal, we know the end value, you know, so that'd be a really cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
So
Plus, as you said, the speed as well for the client.
Which is phenomenal, because that's one of the things that we find really hard when you're starting off, is the length of time something takes to go through your lawyers. You get, and the more people that are involved, the longer it just seems to get, and it's super frustrating to.
Yeah, we have the best solution we've got so far to that is Together Money Bridge and do immediate home sale, IHS. It's a department that they have that's really only available at the likes of We Buy Any Home and these kind of big home buyers.
Right.
We get it through We Buy Home Scotland, but we also get it for our clients, where they'll lend up to 85%, and they aim to get it done. They aim to get a loan offer out to you within 48 hours, and they aim to get it done within a month.
Okay.
So is that going direct to Together then, or as
direct
opposed
to our contact at IHS and Together, and they are like the whole department is designed on getting things done really quickly,
fast, right?
Because it's supposed to be like, you know, if you're buying cash, you can usually get it done in 4 weeks. We want to be able to do the same, but also leverage finance.
Yeah.
That's really good. It's not always perfect. You know, Together will have the odd requirement for a survey, although very seldom, but it does come up occasionally. You know, if there's any indication of damp or anything, they want a damp report done. There are a couple of things that can slow the process down, but if the lawyers are on top of it and we go through IHS, we can normally get it done pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's been pretty cool. In terms of other things, Real Property Scotland's our focus, and we've made the mistake before of splitting our focus. And one of the big mistakes we made was our building company. And it's really easy to convince yourself as an entrepreneur that, okay, I'm doing lots of refurbs, there must be a margin in that, let's do refurbs.
Right.
And, you know, you need to come back to what your core skills are. And for us, we are very much service guys. We're good at doing deals, we're good at managing finance, we're quite office-based guys. We're not good at managing multiple sites and managing tradesmen, and you know, that is not our skill. And we went down that road with the building company, and as well, we buy up and down Scotland.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get teams of guys up and down the country, coordinate them all. You've got vans, you've got materials, you know, joiners, electricians, plumbers. The plumbers quit this week, so we need to get someone else in. And what you tend to find with a lot of tradesmen is that the really good ones work for themselves because they can smash through loads of work, they can make loads of money, and the guys that are willing to come and work for a company are the guys that can't be arsed, and they just want an easy ride, and they want a paycheck at the end of the week.
They want their wage and jobs done.
That costs us a lot of money because, you know, now we run a project management department where it's refurbs for ourselves or our clients. We've got contractors up and down the country that we trust, and they do it for us, and they don't get paid if the job's not done right. Saved us a fortune. It's so simple, you know, but the building game is so difficult. There's such tight margins. You need to have really close control of what's going on site. And when you've got 20 projects going on up and down the country, it's just not manageable. So, you know, that cost us quite a bit of money and a lot of time and focus that we could have been growing our core business and not, you know, and we weren't focused. So,
too much of a distraction.
We are very, very clear on what our focuses are now. We think there's a huge potential to grow Real Property Scotland, both in terms of We Buy Home Scotland, doing more deals, helping more clients build their portfolio. We don't think we're really scratching the surface on that, so we don't want to go off in too many. If there's something that fits our skill set and we can just kind of bolt on, then we'll look at that. But beyond that, it's full focus on that. Development stuff was also another one that we did quite a lot of commercial residential conversions at the start. Bought old office buildings, turned them into flats. Temperance House was probably our kind of most landmark project. Stunning building. built in the 1800s. It's actually one of the first places that John Logie Baird demonstrated the television.
Right.
So huge amount of kind of historical value in this building, and it's beautiful when you go in. It's got the big oak staircase, and we converted that from legal offices into 6 flats during COVID,
Right.
and took
That must have been a great time to do it.
so bad. Like planning, building warrants. Then we had planning, fighting, because it's such a historic listed building.
Yep.
Planning, fighting with building control. Building control want like the modern, compliance requirements met. Planning's like, no, you can't touch that. You can't touch that. And it's like, those guys were fighting more than we were fighting with them.
Yeah.
But the project ended up going on for like an extra 2 years. It probably cost us an extra $500,000. It was expensive, and we still own those assets, and they're great assets, cash flow really well. We're probably at about a break-even point on it,
Right.
but with these development projects, all you see for years is money going out the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like a buy-to-let where you put the money out, you get it refinanced a few months later, and you're cash flowing. It's long-term, big chunks of cash going out. The whole development cost us about £1 million. It's a scary place to be with that. And we bought 4 other buildings in Falkirk High Street that we were going to do the same with.
Right.
And a few of them were much bigger projects. We just sold them.
Yeah.
And we bought them really cheap, so we didn't really lose much money on that. But again, it was just focus and time, and not putting it in the right direction. We did do a couple of commercial to residential conversions that were amazing. We took on an Indian restaurant in Grangemouth,
Right.
turned it into a 10-bed HMO. It's still our
Excellent.
biggest.
You still
cash
got
flow
it, yeah?
asset, yeah. But biggest cash flowing asset. We rent it. We actually rent it to the council. They pay us $7,000 a month. The mortgage on that's about 1,100, and we don't do anything on it. Like, we got lucky with that one.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But we've got 3 of those HMOs in Grangemouth, and they're all kind of similar numbers.
I'm sure they'll continue to do well in the future as well with the plant shutting down.
Well, and I guess, you could worry about, like, are there going to be contractors there? And we did build it for the contractors, and for the first 3 years it was rented out exclusively to contractors. But then the council wanted it, and they gave us a 3-year deal, and they're about to sign another 3-year deal. So, like, long term,
Guaranteed.
exactly. No voids.
You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
No maintenance. They just take care of everything. It's good.
Yeah.
And you always get paid.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Where would you say, because, I mean, again, look at you and Laurie just now, right? I know you said you've not even scratched the surface, but a lot of people look at you saying, big business, doing really, really well. There's got to be a lot of, and there still will be a lot of tough points within there, and you're borrowing a lot of money at points in times. Is there a point in time where you've went, I think we could be under?
I don't think it's ever got to that point. We always figure out. I think, and I think this is the crux of it with entrepreneurship, is like, you really get paid to solve problems.
Yeah.
And the bigger the problems, the more money you can make. So if you can solve bigger problems, you can make more money. So you need to get comfortable with that. Where it would get scary, and my missy said this to me the other day, because I was talking about like the amount of debt that we took on for this deal, and she was like, God, I couldn't sleep at night if I knew I had to deal with that. And I'm like, well, it's sort of what we get paid for.
Yeah.
And like, I'm a finance guy, so if ever I'm feeling nervous about it, I just get into the numbers and analyse it, and it's like, right, okay, that's how we're going to deal with it. It's fine.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, there's been tough times. Like we a lot of our properties we bought with Redwood Finance, and it was on a semi-variable product, which meant when interest rates started going up, we started feeling it immediately.
Yeah.
So those interest rates went from like 4.7% to like 8.5%.
Oh.
But we were fortunate in that, like, and again, that was like just post-COVID and stuff. We're fortunate in that it was those low value assets that were really high yielding. So those 25 grand flats I'm talking about, we rent them out at 500 quid a month. So we were fine.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
You
We
could
weren't
absorb
making
it.
as much money. We lost a lot of our cash flow, but we weren't losing money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were still making it at the end.
So we were fortunate in that. But if someone was highly geared and had the nice shiny flats in Edinburgh that are on 5% gross yield, they'd have been serious trouble.
Yeah.
So I think starting out with these cheaper lower end flats was a real bonus for us, because it stopped us, which could have been a very expensive time for us. That's probably been the scariest time when the interest rates were going through the roof and we weren't on fixed products. The decision to close a building company last year, we had one of our best months ever in Real Property Scotland. I think we made like 100 grand in the month, like landmark month for us on that business, and we had to put all of that cash into the building company to keep it alive, and that was December 2023, and we made the decision in January 2024 to shut it down because we weren't going to destroy a good business.
To cash flow another one.
A bad one.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of tough period of liquidating that and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's been a few moments, but like I say, it's always focused on dealing with the problems kind of head on. And Laurie's a bit maniacal about that. If we've got a problem, he wants to sit and talk about it and deal with it right then and there. Right. And I think there's a bit of balance sometimes, because sometimes problems will just go away. Yeah, you need. It's almost like an art of understanding what you really need to deal with, and what might just go away in a week or two if you just don't deal with it.
Yeah. You don't touch it.
So true.
Yeah, but we've got a good balance on that.
We were talking about that coming through in the car, about how one day you can be sitting with your head in your hands going, oh my God, I can't take one more problem today. And then the next
just all
next 24 hours, it's just like you're bouncing about again thinking, this is great.
Honestly, the ups and downs just get more and more extreme as you go. Like, the more you grow, the more extremes those ups and downs get. And it is literally day to day. One day you're thinking, oh, is it all done? Is it all fucked? And the next day you're thinking...
Did you hear our conversation in the car this morning?
I'm just going to get a job in Tesco.
Yeah, I know.
And it's just your brain playing tricks on you most of the time. Because, when you're focusing on one negative, it tends to bring in all the negatives you think about your business that are in the back of your head. And then when you've had a blinder of a few days, you're like, oh man, we're going to the moon. This thing. Yeah. I'm 3-4 times a month we're up and down like that.
Yeah. I think the biggest lesson I've learned out of all of this, starting this entrepreneurship, is that if your mindset isn't right, you are screwed. Well, in my opinion.
Yeah. This is our number one qualification process for anybody that wants to come and work with us as a client. We want to know your mindset. Yeah. Because we know we can get people to where they want to be, but we can't out-train and out-beat a bad mindset. Yeah. And the amount of people that have an awful mind, even people that have money that still have an awful mindset around money, you just can't, like, it's more hassle than it's worth for us. You start your own business because you want to help people and help them grow and see them achieve, and if you can't help them because that fundamental piece is missing, you just rather not bother.
Yeah. And you can't put it there. That has to be down to that individual.
100%. We've got a few of our clients we've pushed on to start working with a guy called Mark Laurie. I don't know if you know him, but he was a PT coach. He's now doing a lot of mindset training and stuff like that. He's helped us out quite a lot. But some of our best clients have started working with Mark, and just to help them through the ups and downs, like we're talking about, of you've got a tenant not paying this week, and then next week you get an up val on your property, and it's all wonderful. Just helping them through the ups and downs of the mindset, and it's phenomenal what you can do when you spend the time on it.
Yeah. And this guy's name was again, sorry?
Mark Laurie.
Take
Mark
something
Laurie,
away from this today.
Coach. Great guy.
Right.
How many staff have you got working for you just now, roughly?
About 20.
Right, okay.
That's and honestly, it feels like we're starting again since we moved to Glasgow, because we took on a bunch new sales staff, but we also lost a lot of our admin staff in the move. They just didn't want to move to Glasgow, and we've had to rehire them. And then you've got everybody with notice periods, and they can only come in here or there. And like, I've been doing a lot of the payment runs and finance stuff, and like, it's just bogging down my time. So we basically, in fact, there's 3 new staff started since I've been away on holiday. Right. Got a new videographer and a couple of new sales guys, and my new admin guy's back tomorrow, and then we've got PA starting at the start of July. So there's like loads of new staff that we're trying to train up. We also canned our last CRM system, which wasn't working for us. So we've implemented the new CRM.
Okay.
So new systems, new staff, new office.
Yeah.
Loads of moving parts
It's been
just
chaos,
now, yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And I decided to go on holiday because it was kind of a bit much.
That was
Yeah.
a get out. I'll
I'm
just leave
out.
Laurie to it for a week.
Aye, let him deal with it. Everybody was hating him in the office because he was supposed to have the Wi-Fi running for us going in day one. We're
Right.
like 2 weeks without Wi-Fi,
Oh my
working
lord.
off phones.
It sounds like the way you were talking at the start. You're the organised, sensible one.
There's a bit of that, but you know, we wouldn't be to the scale we're at without Laurie pushing. You know, it's just, you know, sometimes we need to balance each other out, and
Yeah.
you know, that's where the balance comes in, and like I say, Connor sits really nicely in between the two of us, and you know, just adds a great balance to everything.
I think it's just.
Sorry, on you go, Alan.
I think it's just like any relationships, they're just all built on strengths and weaknesses, and the collectively the full thing works. But you mentioned your partner earlier on. How important has she been to the full journey with you?
She's phenomenal, really phenomenal. I'm so lucky. I've been through a really bad divorce, and actually, it's probably been one of the biggest challenges for me over the last 3.5 years. My divorce only came through started this year, and I've got 2 young kids, so you know it's been really tough. And I was fortunate to meet Amanda. She's been married before as well. She's got a couple of kids, Dallin and Oliver. They're awesome. But everything that I didn't have before, I've got with Amanda. And it's just like understanding what works and what doesn't. And I can't believe it took me to like my late 30s to be able to understand the sort of person I need to be. And it's funny because I can quite often sometimes see Laurie's character traits in Amanda. And it's like you need that polarization that works quite well. You know, she'll challenge me on things, or she'll make me think about things differently to the way that I would normally. But you know, massively supportive.
Yeah.
You know, she's always the one trying to sit us down and say, well, what's the objectives? What are we trying to achieve over the next little while? She's quite spiritualist. You know, she's mindful. You know, she adds a really good counterbalance to life, and you know, it would be impossible to do what we're doing without someone supportive beside you. I've tried it before; it didn't work.
I totally agree.
Like a lot of people just can't understand the risks that you want to take, and the amount of effort and focus and time you want to put into something, and you do need someone to kind of counterbalance that at home as well. Yeah. So no, I'm really lucky there.
No. That's good.
But I feel like I deserve it, to be honest. You know,
Yeah.
like if anybody had been through that divorce that I had to go through to get to where I am now, and the amount of money that, you know, anyway, let's not go down that road. But, you know, I feel like, you know, where I'm at is it's been fought for.
Yeah.
Like the business, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that will have such a positive effect on the business, because they both, you know, when you're going between your business relationship and your personal relationship, they do absolutely, the mindset does cross paths.
Yeah.
If your personal relationship's great, you're going into your workplace with the correct mindset, and then exiting the workplace into your personal relationship with a great mindset, and they do absolutely counterbalance off each other.
Massively. You know, being able to even just be able to focus on your business and the growth of it, because you've got someone supporting you emotionally, as well as, you know, dealing with all the stuff at home that needs to be dealt with. It's just massively powerful. And you know, I was listening to the podcast he's done with Ajmal Mushtaq, who he was my neighbour actually up until recently. We moved last year. I interviewed him on a podcast. Great guy.
Really nice guy.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy.
Really like what he has to say. And he was talking about this exact thing of the fact his wife doesn't work and she's at home, and you know how that helps him grow his business.
Do what he does,
You know, there's a lot of positives around it, but the reality is not a lot of people are in the position to be able to do that. You know, so we're fortunate, and you know, it adds a huge amount of value to my life.
Yeah, it's very interesting because
good things ahead.
Yeah, it's really interesting because any entrepreneur that we speak to, it's funny because the conversation always at some point involves your personal relationship.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
because it's so
massive.
so important, and I don't think people out with that space realise how important it is. It's no coincidence. Every one of you guys always comes back to that subject.
And well, you know, especially when you've seen the alternative.
Yes.
You know, like I don't think my business would have survived in my previous relationship because the moves that I've had to make and the risks that I've had to take to get to where we are, it would have, something would have broken down along that way, whether it was the relationship, which did anyway, or the business. Something had to give there, you know, and like it's just not possible without the right dynamic at home. And again, you know, it's just massively fortunate to be able to have someone who can take care of a lot of the stuff that you just can't, you know. It's powerful. You know, I was thinking about this the other week because, you know, obviously most families now, both parents have to go out to work, and you know,
And they're still struggling.
yeah,
Yeah.
still struggling, and a lot of people talk about the cost of living, and the cost of living is valid, but I think the big thing really is the cost of property. You know, when you look at back to 1980s, average salary was about what, 3-4 grand, something like that. The average property price was about 15,000. So it was like a 3-4 times multiplier of salary.
Yes.
We're now like where we're at now, 270, 280 average property price. Average salary is like 35 grand.
Yeah.
It's like 9 times multiplier of salary. So the cost of the average home has got so exponentially more expensive compared to what people earn. Like, do you have a choice but for two parents to work to try and bridge some of that gap? Like, most people are and that's only getting worse as well. So I just don't know where we go with, okay, I'm a property entrepreneur, but I don't know where this thing ends with the big divide here. You know, it's becoming impossible for the average family.
I think that's why we're seeing more people now. Maybe not necessarily, probably more people who are wanting to step into the world of entrepreneurship because they're realising it's the only way. Nobody's coming to save you.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming to help you. It's me.
Exactly.
It's
You
down to
against the
me.
world, really.
The only guy that can help my family out is me. And especially in the world of employment where, as we mentioned earlier on about the AI coming on, more people are losing their jobs. You know, more people who were in jobs before, even high-paid corporate jobs, that people are losing those jobs.
Yeah.
Those jobs are not saving you. So there are a lot of people realising, including myself, this is down to me and nobody else.
There's no one coming to save you, and you know the protection of a job that used to be for life just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's mad. I was going to make a point on that, but I forgot.
We do it all the time. I'm going to say something. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Really interesting point on that. But you're never going to hear it because it's
I know.
gone.
You'll be driving the car on the way home. Be like, that was
That's
it.
what I was going to
That
say.
was it. We'll get a message later on.
Yeah, like you are there to protect your family, as I see it. You know, that's my number one job, and I'm always thinking about, you know, when we have. That was what I was going to say. When we have people coming to see us, potential clients, or looking to build a buy-to-let portfolio, that is usually one of two things they're trying to achieve. Not even necessarily additional income so they can have more holidays or, you know, live a better life, but have protection. You know, if the income from the job disappeared,
They've got a backup.
They've got a backup plan. Or it's trying to get one of the parents out of employment, you know, whether it's the wife or the husband. In fact, Chris, who works for us, she used to be a doctor, and now she's our client manager. But she's built her own portfolio and most of our staff are kind of interested in building their own portfolio, or they're doing that. But she's I think she must have about 10 properties now, and she's now at a point where her husband wouldn't have to work if he didn't want to. So
Right.
it was just quite an interesting dynamic of, you know, she's through working with us, built this great portfolio. She's even doing some serviced accommodation stuff now. Loves her job, and you know, she's created a situation where, you know, our husband can have a bit more flexibility. So yeah, sorry, one of two things. One is, you know, that kind of income protection, or it's they're business owners looking to diversify their income. So if the business went down one day, they'd have property assets that they could lean back on, or if they sold the business at some point, they'd have an income left through property. and that's really what the game is for a lot of people. But you know, it's a scary place to be if you're relying solely on an income from a job, because it's not guaranteed it's going to be there in the near future.
What? How are the people reaching out to you as clients, wanting to help? Want you to help them build this portfolio for them or this backup plan, if you're not doing a specific kind of education program? Have I picked that up right?
Yeah, we do. We do get a lot of referrals from existing clients.
Right.
You know, we do a lot of webinars where there's never any sales pitch with our webinars, but there is an opportunity to speak to Chris, who coordinates all our clients. Although there's a bit of a qualification process, really just to understand if it'd be right for them and us.
Right.
So, and you know, we're on social media and stuff like that as well. But the majority of it is organic. It's funny because we spend so much money on We Buy Home Scotland marketing and stuff like that. We tend not to do much marketing spend on the kind of client side. You know, because
just kind of happens naturally.
Yeah, and there's a limit. You know, where our average client is expecting to do 3 or 4 below market value deals every year. So there's only so many below market value deals we're doing. I think we're doing 30 odd a month just now. So we're very careful about the amount of clients that we can take on as well. So it's not like these property trainers where they're trying to get 50, 60 people through the door every month and they train them and then they're away. You know, we work with clients long term. Like I say, the aim for us is to get a client to qualify buyer status within 2 years. So they've done a bunch of deals, they know the ins and outs of it, you know, challenges are going to come across, that they know how to get a deal done. And then after that period, they just sit in our qualified buyer pool and they can just buy deals as they become available. And for us, it's just all about growing We Buy Home Scotland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, listen, we'll put all the links to We Buy Home Scotland, Real Property Scotland group in the show notes below.
Awesome.
It's been great having you on. I've learned a lot. It'd be good to
Absolutely.
get
It's been
you
a great
on.
chat.
If you've said earlier on that you've not even scratched the surface, well, it'd be good to get you back on when you have scratched the surface. And get Laurie on. Let's see the dynamic.
Yeah, that'd be good. He'd definitely have a whole different take on stuff than I would. We're very different humans, but no, it's cool. It's a cool dynamic.
Oh, perfect. Listen, I appreciate your time. Thanks very much,
Thanks very
Alex.
much for coming
You're
along.
welcome. Thanks a lot.